Joining me today is fellow RC enthusiast Ed Wenger. I met Ed at a local crawling meet. After talking with him, I found out we've been involved in the hobby for about the same time. But compared to me, Ed is working really hard on advancing his skills to become a competitive crawler. So I found his story and insights both amusing and helpful. So for any casual backyard crawler looking to move up to the local comp scene or beyond, I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Hi Ed, thanks for joining me today. Taking the time to chat with me about RC.
Oh, no problem.
I know that you haven't been in the hobby for long. So when did you first start in the hobby?
Well, it would have been Christmas 2018.
That's almost identical to me.
Yeah.
I got lured in by a Christmas sale. So what got you started?
I have a son. He was 8 at the time. And as most parents do, you want to get yourself or your son some Christmas toys. So we had always bought him the toy grade stuff, the cheap $30, $40, RC type thing.
Yeah.
And he would have them for a month or so, hit a rock, break it, and that was done. And he and I had been watching for some time the videos on YouTube from Motorama, and we were watching these tiny trucks, and I always thought it was kind of neat to watch it and to actually do it. So
Right.
I had a friend of mine who was into RC circle track racing. We were friends on Facebook and stuff. So I messaged him one day and I said, hey, listen, I'm thinking about getting my son a better RC crawler. Do you have any brands that you would recommend? Because I knew nothing about RC. I'd never picked up an RC controller, hobby grade, anything like that. So he said, well, it's funny you say that because I happen to have a Red Cat Gen 7 that I got from a buddy of mine. I'm really not into it. Would you be interested in buying it? I said, yeah, let me take a look at it. I talked the wife into it. I bought it. Little did I know that was probably going to be one of the cheaper things I ever buy in RC. We got it, gave it to him for Christmas, and he was over the moon. 3 days later, after standing around watching him drive it, and we were kind of arguing over the controller, I went and bought my own Gen 7. As they say, the rest is history. I think I'm up to over 20 RCs. Most of those are crawlers.
That's quite the collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have me beat by many. Yeah, I know. But joking aside, Ed, I know that you've been working hard to move up into the world of competition. So how and when did you start making that transition from crawling in the backyard with your son to entering the comp scene?
Well, I was very fortunate. Being new to the hobby, not knowing, who was into it or whatever, looking for information, I got on Facebook and I found a group, Eastern PA crawlers, RC crawlers, and I started messaging them, and I found out that they do a lot of events as a club. And I'm quite blessed to be living about 15 minutes away from Roush Creek Off-Road Park, which is a very well-known one-to-one crawling off-road type stuff. And they said that, hey, we're going to have one of our first club events of the year up at Roush Creek. How'd you like to come up and run? We went up there. So that day, we showed up with our 2 trucks and charged batteries and everything. And so prior to going up there, a buddy of mine that I got to know gave me a aftermarket controller and transmitter and receiver. So I swapped this out. So long story short, we're up there for our first day. My son's all excited. I'm excited. We've been looking at doing this for almost 3 months.
Right.
So we're walking across the parking lot as a group, and next thing I know, my truck just starts going crazy. I have no control over it. It was turning left, it was turning right, it was going forward, it was stopping, and I couldn't figure out what's wrong. Well, here, another guy in the group, his name's Timmy, and for some reason, Timmy's controller, his transmitter, locked onto my receiver, and he took control of my truck. It was the weirdest thing. I haven't seen anything since. But our trucks were mirrored. So as he went straight, my truck went straight, and vice versa. It was like they were hooked in tandem. And no matter what we did, we could not unbind them. We could not separate it. So I'm getting ready to turn and look at my son. I was getting ready to tell him, hey, listen, buddy, I'm sorry. We got to pack up and go home. Dad's truck's broken.
Right.
This guy I didn't even know walked up to me. He's like, hey, bud, I see what's going on here. He says, I have another transmitter and a receiver out in my pickup truck. Do you want it? And I'm like, sure. So we swapped everything out there on the spot and we went about our way. And of course he went his way, and with his group of friends, it was still the same club, but we kind of got separated. I didn't even know this guy's name. So here's a guy I never met, gave me, I think it was a Spectrum system. So, it wasn't a cheap system, but
no.
just said, here, take it. Saved the day, and turned out to be a very good friend of mine, Muskie. So that's kind of how I got involved in, and it's a long-winded way of answering your question about competition. So that leads into further on that year in June, the club was having the Coal Cracker and the Northeast Scale Nationals, I guess is what it was. So that June was my first exposure to competition, and I was hooked, absolutely hook, line, and sinker, because for me, like I said, I'm a consummate tinker. So you go and you make adjustments and you research and you buy parts and stuff. Well, what better way to see if they're actually working than to put them to the test?
Right. And also you've got the feedback in competition. You're not running solo. You've got other people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's the networking. It's the whole camaraderie thing about it. Yeah. And you get to watch and see how other guys have their trucks set up and, ask questions. I've been involved in a lot of different hobbies and groups and so forth. I'll be honest, I have never met a group of people with such a diverse personal background that come together, and literally it's like you're friends forever. I've met more people than I can count. Everybody is just more than welcoming and willing to help.
I find what's interesting is that because it brings in different people from different areas, you see a very sort of different attitude and approach to things. Sometimes in conversation, that brings in different aspects. You see things from different ways because of that diversity.
Exactly. It's such a wide gamut of people that are into the hobby. I think what I find amazing is how diverse the hobby of RC really is, even within the crawling sector of it. I mean, there's, and that's just a snippet, because you have planes and boats and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it truly has the ability to fit what you're interested in.
And it does seem to be that, especially in the competition realm, if you're not a tinkerer, if you don't like to sort of build and play around, you're almost faced to either buying off the shelf, and there aren't too many competitive rigs out there that you can just buy off the shelf. It's either a commission piece or something you have to build yourself, isn't there?
From a scale aspect, I would say probably not. And competitive is kind of a broad term. That's the other thing about the RC. You can go to local club events, and say if it's a Circa Light type event, and you can go and take a stock Traxxas TRX4, make some free modifications, change the wheels and tires, and have a very competitive rig. If you want to go to the upper class, or the next class up, which is class 2.5, that's when you start to get into the purpose-built rigs with the custom chassis, flat rail, carbon fiber G10 type material chassis, and the highly modified vehicles.
Right. That was that level that I was alluding to. Just don't see those. You only ever see the parts for sale.
I don't know anybody that does turnkey.
No.
Almost RTR, full-blown comp rig, scale comp rig.
So, I mean, the tinkering, is that something that you've always done from when you remember, or is that something that you sort of came around through other means?
Like I said, I've always been a tinkerer. I've always liked to do stuff, build stuff, test stuff. I'm kind of blessed in being mechanically inclined. I grew up on a farm, and you kind of had to be mechanically inclined to be self-sufficient. I would say that the RC hobby is the first thing that I've found that allows me to tinker down here in my workshop, and then take it out with the family and use it. Prior to this, I was into building high-end AR-15 rifles.
A little different.
Yeah. I always had a shooting background, but anyhow, I kind of got into those late in life and bought my first one, and found out that basically they're Legos for men.
Yes.
Or anybody, adults.
Yeah.
And you could buy and replace and upgrade, and then luckily for the wallet, I found the RCs, which I don't know if I would add it all up if it's necessarily cheaper than some of my other hobbies I've been involved with, but it's definitely a lot more family friendly, shall we speak.
I made the mistake. I put everything that I purchased for a build into a database, and I wish I hadn't done that.
It is scary to think how quickly it adds up. I just over last winter, I built my first dedicated class 2 Sorca class 2 comp rig. I did like you did. Actually, a friend of mine from the club asked me to give him a build sheet, and I started listing all the parts that I put together, and I started putting prices with it. And actually, I stopped putting prices with it. Yeah, because I kind of built it the way I want to build it. You know what I mean? It was a once and done type thing.
There's the answer, isn't it? In some respects, because you're not buying it as a one-off unit, because you have to build them. You don't look at it as a whole. It's those components that get you.
Yeah. It adds up quickly. Adds up quickly. But I'm very happy with the truck that I wound up with. I'm sure there's probably some stuff I could do better moving forward here with the next build. But it's the cost of the experience.
No.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
It was well worth every penny. I just had the truck out yesterday doing some tuning and testing with a friend of mine, and I love it. I absolutely love the truck.
Yeah. Obviously, when you started in sort of in a very basic way, and you obviously decided to move it up a notch, so you're looking at soccer events now and of that caliber. So that's changed the vehicle that you require and everything else. What other steps have you taken to advance yourself as to becoming a more competitive driver?
I've kind of become a student of the hobby. There's a gentleman, Bill Riddle, and he's put out some really good instructional videos, and I've watched several of them, and they've been enlightening, because you can watch something from the sidelines and you think you understand what's going on, and you can only surmise what the driver's thinking, or what his plan is. But Bill does a really good job in narrating. I'm doing this, I'm coming up here, I'm anticipating that. But just getting out and competing and driving, it's just like anything else. You can't replace time. It takes work. I mean, there are some people that just have natural driving ability. I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
I'll admit, I got into this hobby late in life, turned 52 back in November. Probably picking it up as quick as I would have, say, 20 years ago. But it's definitely an addiction.
Yeah. I think that we've spoken about this before, but there's a lot more to it when you actually get into the competition realm. There is the car, which is the obvious, you build yourself, modify your car in order to compete at whatever stage. But the actual event itself brings in so many different facets. It brings in, how you drive each gate, the way you exit the gate, set yourself up for the next gate, watching your time, thinking about the points, the penalties, the sort of the mental math on the fly, so to speak. I mean, there are so many components to it. And it was interesting, if you watch like you say, watching some of Bill Riddle's videos, he's even like, when I saw, several people take this approach, I decided to do this approach. There's all those machinations that go on. You start to, until you do it though, you don't realize that it's so easy to get lost in the weeds, isn't it?
It is. I never, when I started down this, never realized what type of a strategy game it is, and what type of a, for lack of a better term, mind game.
Right.
Thinking. I just thought, you just kind of went out there and drove it as it came. And I had done that in the past and didn't always work out so well. I didn't have a plan.
Yeah. But I think it's hard, because you practice, you drive in your backyard, you drive on your local trails, and it's all about driving. And it's just doing that. But when you actually start to say, well, no, you have to go here, you can't go here, you put gates in the way, and you put people watching you, you put the timing and everything else, it just starts to pile on. It just, all those layers build up and create a completely different scenario. And it just becomes so much more than just the driving, which doesn't seem obvious to perhaps someone from the outside. It just looks like you're driving, but as you know, there's way more going on in your mind, isn't there? There's so many factors you need to bring in.
There is. And that's, this past year, I really started paying attention to a lot of the good drivers at some of these competitions. They put in the work before they get there, and they put in the work the day of before they run. They're out walking the course. They're looking at it. They're talking amongst themselves, and they are watching their fellow competitors as they go through. Which is kind of unique, I would think, because it doesn't seem to be. They don't draw for starting positions. You just kind of walk up, drop your truck in line, and go when you want to go. There's some people that want to go first and get it over with and just run it, and then there's others that want to hang back and I want to see how this guy did this, and I want to see how, that kind of thing.
Right.
If you want to go out and have fun, just go out and run and have competition. And, you can do that. You can just show up, drive, and have a good time. But if you want to progress up through the standings, so to speak, and really test yourself, and then you have to put some work in. You have to get serious about it.
Right. And I think it's the danger of things like YouTube. I think it doesn't matter what sport or what interest, you look at people and they demonstrate something on YouTube, or they do something, they film themselves, and you think, wow, that's pretty neat, and it doesn't look that hard. But if you actually knew them or you got involved, that you often find there's either years of practice behind that, there's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of research. Like you say, they don't just walk up and it happens. Invariably, they've planned things out and they've got things going on in their mind. It is complicated, and there is far more going, and you do have to work at all the various disciplines that come into mind.
Like I said, if you want to get serious about competition, there's a lot of preparatory work, both with the vehicles and with yourself. Before I go to competition, I always go over my trucks and make sure it's tight and right and everything's the way it's supposed to be, and show up today and the competition and try to do the same mentally.
Yeah. So do you practice, apart from just practice driving, do you try and simulate any of the other pressures that you get or any of those game plans?
Not as much as I should. Not as much as I should. We were out yesterday and took some gates along to set up on a course to try to run some gates. Most of my driving experience has been with a group of friends, and we kind of go out, and it can turn into 2 hours of here, hold my beer, or I bet you can't make that, or hey, I made this, right. Can you? And that's what kind of pushes you in your driving ability. But I think if I want to progress into placing better at some of the competitions, I need to kind of get away from that less structured driving and kind of go out and set some gate and push myself and push the truck.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I was setting this truck up, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he's like, well, you need to tune the truck to your driving style. I said, driving style? What do you mean driving style? Well, yeah. Are you a fast aggressive driver? Are you slow methodical driver? I'm like, you mean there's styles? I just go out, drop the truck down, pull the trigger, and see what happens. He says, no, it doesn't work that way. So that's, it's multifaceted.
Moving forward, are you setting goals for 2022?
Yes. The main thing is to keep doing what I did here towards the end of 2021, trying to get to as many competitions as I can, drive my truck more. I went down to Super Shafty for the fall crawl in the end of September, and I didn't have as much drive time on the truck as I probably should have. I think it showed in my performance. Yeah, that's pretty much the game plan for 2022 is just to keep building upon what I've learned the previous year.
Yeah, Super Shafty, that's a pretty tough course.
Yeah, it was more difficult than I could have anticipated, more fun than I could have ever imagined. I placed 100th out of 125 or so people in my class, and I was absolutely ecstatic. I was having a discussion with a family member. How do you think you did? And I did wonderful. Well, where'd you place? I placed 100th out of 125 drivers. And they kind of looked at me. I said, no, you don't understand. I completed 3 of the 4 courses. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was just missed completing the last course I was on the 10th gate and timed out. I said, I'm over the moon with that. Obviously I wanted to do better, but the amount of experience and information and learning that I took away from it is well surpasses my placing in the ranks.
Yeah. So what was different with Super Shafty as an event compared to, say, local events?
I think the level of competition, the level of the drivers. They're pulling people. They pull people in from all over the country for some good, really, really, really good drivers there.
Right. Yeah. If you look down the results list, there's a lot of recognizable names there.
One of the guys from our area, Dave Zettelmoyer, was in the top 5, and I think class 1, class 2, and maybe even class 3. There's a local guy.
Wow.
That is a national level competitor.
Yeah.
It was really neat to watch Davey Z run.
Any lessons learned?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway is kind of what I had said earlier about, showing up to the event with the right mindset, making sure you're right and tight, making sure your equipment is put together right, and you've got it dialed in to the best of your ability, you're well experienced with how the truck's going to react. The only pressure that you're under is the pressure that you put on yourself. Obviously there's time constraints. So your ability to manage that pressure and to manage that stress of having extremely difficult terrain with relatively short time frames in which to get through it. You know, they build those courses to be tough, both mentally and on the equipment.
Right. I mean, you can see, and I think when the severity of the course picks up like that, it's very easy that it stops you looking forward because you're more focused on the obstacle or the gate at hand, when you should be looking at a bigger picture too. You've got to be looking at your exit point, your entry point.
Well, yeah, I call it the list of contingencies. Say gate 2 on course 3. I'm just using it as an example. You want to come into that at a certain aspect and a certain angle, and that's going to set you up for the next gate. Okay, or your exit, how you exit that gate. If something goes wrong, if you don't hit your marks, so to speak, and or the truck doesn't react the way you anticipate it's going to react, you have to have the ability to think on the fly and adjust it. Like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. For me, I have a plan until they say go, and that's the biggest thing is having a plan and having the ability to stick to it as close as possible to work yourself through the different situations. And I think for me, that's the biggest return personally that I get from competition, is that stressor of having to solve problems in a very short time period. There was a couple of times where my truck it just flipped over and it went down dropped into a crevice. And I'm like, how am I going to work myself out of this? And you just keep trying different things and working. And, I had a spotter. That's one of the first times I've ever used a spotter to kind of help me. And I call it my emotional crutch, because he helped. There was a couple of times he's like, Ed, calm down, take a breath. And I started getting myself worked up, which helped me refocus. And he's calling out my points. And that was one of the biggest things that I took away from that, is just the whole gamesmanship. I learned a term down there that weekend called taking a gate dirty. I'm like, I heard somebody say that. Well, I'll take that 30 if I have to. What's that mean? Well, what you got to understand that is, you have X amount of time to get through something. And if you don't complete the course, if you get a DNF, that's 100-point penalty against you. Whereas pointing out is 80 points.
Right.
So there may be a time where you're going to run out of time where you just need to blow through that gate to get progress, to complete the course.
Yeah.
And it becomes, I guess, almost like a chess game. You figure, okay, I'm going to sacrifice this for the greater good to get through here.
Right.
And that's something that wasn't even on my radar prior to going to an event like Super Shafty.
Right. And I think when you watch those events, it's always hard because sometimes there's an obstacle or gate, they look like they're having problems. Some people stay and work at it, and others go straight to a winch. And I can see the expediency in going straight to the winch. And the person that works at it, if they manage to pull it off in a couple of moves, they took 2 or 3 moves to do it, and they managed it so they don't take any penalties for winching. And I think that was great. But when you're actually doing it, that takes a presence of mind. But what point do you call it? You know what I mean? It's like, sometimes you see people go beyond where they should have done, and they still keep attempting. It's like, stop it. You're not getting there.
The definition of stupidity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome.
Right.
I think I need to have that tattooed on my forehead or printed on the inside of my glasses, because I can't tell you how many times as a competitor driver myself, I just keep running straight into that wall and then get the same result. And you're right. It kind of keys off of what you were saying. You have to have that presence of mind to realize, hey, plan A isn't working.
Right.
I got to switch. I got to switch something. I got to do something different to get myself out of this. And once again, it's those problem solving skills. You have to have the ability to recognize what the situation is and what are my options to work through it.
Right. And I think you can see, a friend of mine was saying that having a spotter is a really good way to help you sort of develop those skills, because sometimes having someone on the outside can actually say, hey, let's go to the winch, let's move forward, or let's think about your exit point here. Or, they can point out things that perhaps when you're focused on the actual gate itself, and they're also, don't forget this aspect, or don't forget the exit angle, that helps you not become too blinkered.
Exactly. Yeah, you can get front sight focused too much,
right?
And can't see the forest from the trees, so to speak.
Right. I mean, we're all so much smarter with hindsight. Well, you come out of it, you go, people go, why didn't you just reverse around that? And you go, I didn't think of that. And it's those sort of forehead slapping moments sometimes.
And I think that was the biggest difference that I saw between myself and some of the other top drivers, is their ability to have alternatives. They know the rule book. In other words, there was a particular gate on the one course that was pretty steep, and the exit of it was pretty tricky. And I looked at that gate originally and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go through there. I'll go through that gate and come down around. And I watched this guy, he kind of pulled up through, he got his back wheels beyond the gate. And the judge said progress, and he backed down through it and went around. And I'm thinking to myself, that's genius.
Yeah.
That's genius. He just avoided all those obstacles on the backside of that gate. Okay, it's 100% legal. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's using your head. That's thinking smart. And
Right.
that's what it's about. I mean, if I was to sum it up, it would be smart about it.
Yeah. And that, I mean, as I say, that's easy to do in hindsight, or when you watch other people do stuff. Like you say, you look at moves and you go, oh, I wish I'd thought of that. That was amazing. You know, but I mean, sometimes that's the growth process as well, isn't it? Because watching people take alternate route, maybe next time you see something similar, you'll go, I can see an alternate route on that.
Yeah. I would say if some of your listeners are interested in getting into competition, I wasn't really sure where to start. I just kind of showed up, dropped my truck down and tried to drive. Yeah. And it's exactly right. And that's how everybody kind of starts. Some of the things I wish I would have known before I started was some of the things I've already gone over. Go over your vehicle, make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. Everything's functioning the way it's supposed to be. Just like you would prepare for any other type of competition, show up early to the competition. Don't get rushed as far as getting checked in and just kind of watch and see and have fun. That's the biggest thing. The other thing, getting back to Super Shafty, that I thought was neat was to see the national, what I'm going to call the national teams. There were several manufacturers that were there that were represented with a group of team drivers, and to watch the interaction of the team members with each other and watch how the team worked and stuff was really, really neat to see.
I can see that. Now you're a team driver yourself, aren't you?
I am. I've been blessed to be a part of some teams. I'm currently on Trio Hobby team. I was on in 2021. I was on DSM Off-Road as a team driver. They've decided to discontinue the team moving into 2022 and go a little bit different route. But yeah, that's been an experience.
Really? I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say positive or.
Yes, very positive. One of the things that I kind of went into being part of a team with is the understanding that it's a job. Okay. Teams put people on as their representative. Okay. And they're hoping to get positive product exposure and representation at events and club get-togethers and stuff like that. They have certain levels of expectations. It varies from team to team, but they're looking for you to be an ambassador for their company.
Right. So it's more about the personality of us ambassadors.
It is. When I was down there at Super Shafty, I went around to a couple of different manufacturers and I'm like, hey, what do you look for in a team driver? And there was one common answer that stood out above all else, and that's be a good person. Be a good ambassador for the hobby. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of, there's team drivers and then what they call brand ambassadors. Team drivers are people that tend to go to more of the competitions and compete and represent the manufacturers in that aspect. And then your brand ambassadors are the people who are probably more social media active. They are looked upon to expose a new product to the market through social media and, so forth.
Right. So to just create awareness and keep the product uppermost in people's minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's some of the pros. Some of the cons, if you want to call it that, when it's known that you are a team driver, or even if it's not, you're kind of held to a different standard. You want to make sure that whatever you say and do, you're representing yourself first and foremost in a positive light, and also the company. Because what you say and do is a reflection on that company. We all know that, you spend much time on Facebook. It's easy to get into what I call the Facebook battles, where one person says something and then you kind of jump in and stuff like that. That's not really something that I choose to engage, because I don't want to portray my personal perspective or opinion and have it misconstrued as being associated with one of the companies that I represent.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes I've seen people get themselves involved with good intentions. They're not trying to antagonize or fan the flames, so to speak. But, even sometimes the best advice, people just come back at it with such sort of venom, and it's like, it's best to walk away.
Yeah. And you just got to kind of roll with it. I mean,
Right.
there are people who, for whatever reason, they take a very vehement opinion about things and about the way they do things, and that's the only way to do it. Yeah. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The one thing that makes this hobby so great is you build a truck the way you want to build it. Okay. You have your truck, you add stuff to your truck because you think that looks nice. That's the way you want it. And you got to keep that in perspective. It's whatever works for you. And at the end of the day, it's your truck. You don't have to please anybody. You're not building it for anybody but you.
Right. I think the fun part for me is, the RC does give you that. I like to tinker, and it's fun to play around. And it's nice to think you've evaluated a situation. You think you've seen a shortfall, changed the truck up, you buy a different product, you fix the shortfall, and now you've made that. It's a nice feeling. You actually go, wow, my truck's doing better than it did when I finished tinkering with it. It did better than it did beforehand, hopefully. And
or just, I was just going to say, or just the opposite. Now it doesn't
or just
work
the
at
opposite,
all.
yeah. But I mean, that's how you learn, isn't it? I mean, that tinkering is exactly good or bad. I mean, if you make a change and it's 10 times worse than it was when you go, okay, I got that wrong, but you just learned something, which is
You had a guest on a previous show, a gentleman from Deluxe Fab.
Yeah, Matt B. Yes.
Yeah, Matt. And he had a very valid point. He's like, don't go changing a bunch of things at once. Change one thing at a time and see how it works. I mean, with these trucks, with crawlers in general, there's some basic principles that come into play. You want to try to keep your center of gravity as low as possible. You want to try to keep the wheelbase, the tire, whatever, it all comes into play. I mean, but beyond that, it's you do what you got to do to get the truck to perform the way you want it to perform. There's so many aspects just within crawling. There's people that are purely into the scale aspect of it. They want it to look as realistic as possible. And I got to be honest with you, when I first got into the hobby, I kind of looked at these people and I thought they were a little nerdy. And I'm kind of like, wow, that seems a little out there. And then I had the realization that people that are into the scale aspect of it more so are really no different than I was when I was building models as a kid. My objective and my goal was to build that model to make it look as realistically as possible.
Right.
The only difference is these guys do it and then they take their trucks out on the trail and drive them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and I think, I found there seems to be a little bit of an evolution too. I just talked to a buddy of mine on the phone the other day and he's like, I think I'm going to sell all my comp rigs and just do trail runs. I'm like, are you crazy? How, you're big into competition. You go, you do well. And he's like, yeah, I'm just kind of over it. And it got me thinking, he has probably 3 or 4 more years in the hobby than I do. And maybe there will be a point in my journey where I say, you know what, I'm just kind of done with the competition. I'm just out here to run trails and have fun. Right. To me, I don't see that because I'm so enthralled with seeing how far I can push the truck and how far I can push myself that I'm not ready to kind of just, go out and run trails and have fun. I mean, I like to run trails.
Your focus is different. I mean, right.
Yeah, as you and I talked about previously, on the phone, I tend to trail to get from one difficult object to the other.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I understand. And I think the scale things, it's a state of mind. I called with the guy and he in our group, he was having trouble. It turns out he was basically running a scale class 1, leaf spring truck. And, he was struggling, but at the end of it, he was as pleased as punch because he managed to do all those elements with a leaf sprung truck.
Yeah.
And that was the joy in that. And the moment you look at that perspective, it's like people that ride fixed wheel mountain bike, why give up 21 gears for one? But they take great pleasure in doing the same thing you've just done in one gear. And I mean, if that's what makes you happy, that's what makes you happy.
Well, when I got into the hobby, one of my first couple rigs was a Wraith with 2.2 tires on it. Yeah. I love that truck because I could go out and pretty much climb over anything. Okay. That is probably one of my least driven trucks right now because it is so capable. It just became to the point where it wasn't fun.
Right.
And I had heard this adage a long time ago when I first got into this, that tiny tires make better drivers. Yeah. Okay. The guys that are running the 4.19s, it's harder. It is because you don't have the ground clearance and they're running, some of them are running leaf sprung trucks and stuff like that. You have to think about it more. You have to pick your lines better. You have to, you can't just go out and plow through stuff.
Right.
And it's funny because I would have never thought that I would be interested in a class 1 truck. It just didn't do anything for me. Well, this winter I plan on building a class 1.
Yeah.
I'm waiting till I see what the new circle rules are, because it's my understanding that there's going to be some big changes in class 1 coming.
Oh, really?
No, that was the other thing from Super Shafty. I was running a Lexan body and I was at 38 points and the max points were 50. Those 12 points, they hurt me.
Yeah.
They hurt me. I could have used those 12 points. So yeah, if you're going to go to a level competition like that, make sure you're maxed out on your points. It's just an unnecessary disadvantage.
Right. So I mean, so obviously you're moving into the higher end of the Sorka competition, is where you've got your eye, where you're going.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you still think there's plenty of scope for people you can achieve that with a slightly modified truck or a heavily modified truck?
At a local level? Yeah. I truly think there can be. And, it all comes down to what you're running against. If you take my G-Speed that I built for Super Shafty and put that up against somebody that has a modified RTR, it's going to be difficult. Now, I can tell you, there are people out there that can take a modified RTR and just clean my clock if I'm running my G-Speed, because they're drivers. You know what I mean? You can't buy your way to the top. And what I mean by that is you can go out and buy the best equipment. Okay. But that doesn't assure success. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier about putting in the time and driving.
Yeah. No, I think that's hard. That's something that's very easy to lose sight of. That maybe you're better off, rather than spending a couple of hours on the internet looking at drive shafts, you might be better off spending a couple of hours driving.
Well, and the other thing is, and I said this to a couple of more experienced drivers, I'm like, you guys, you want to make a fortune? Why don't you offer a coaching service?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where you can go out and run clinics, or, for X amount of dollars per hour, I will pay you to stand there and tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Right.
Because in some people that would be very beneficial, like myself. It goes back to that definition of stupidity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. But if I don't know what the alternatives are, I have no other choice but to bumble through it till I finally figure it out.
Right. And that process can get expensive.
It can. Yeah. It can, both in time and money. And that's the biggest thing for me when we're talking about competition is to understand that I am extremely new to this. I'm novice at best. And I look at some of the other drivers, like I mentioned before, and just watch what they can do. I wish I had the ability to do that Vulcan mind melt where I could just take all their knowledge and all their experience and just put it in my head.
Right.
But you got to put the work in.
Yeah, but you're putting yourself out there, and I mean that will come. I am sure of it.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
You have to be. I mean, you have to be out and playing to get those rewards, and I mean you will. It's just if you're starting to put the time in now. That's what you're doing now.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm by nature not a very patient person. My wife and son will tell you that. Yeah. I want everything yesterday. But you're right. There's a lot of people out there that have paid a lot of dues and done a lot of work. But to me, I am having an absolute blast with this whole hobby. Like I said, you meet some wonderful people. I got to be a part of, like I said, like the Trio hobby team, great group of guys, a wealth of knowledge and experience. I know that if I run into a problem with something, I can call them up on the Facebook group and say, hey, listen, guys, I'm having this problem. What do you think? And get legitimate answers, not the Facebook warrior speculation that all too often is out there. There's so much misinformation out there from people that, in their own right, think they have the answer. And it may not be right.
It's amazing when you look at the internet, going back when we had to go to the library and things like that, or go to the local hobby shop for our information. What you can glean by just spending a few hours on the computer is absolutely amazing. But also misinformation out there is also, and I mean, and it depends on your personal experience. But I mean, if you sort of throw out there, what's the best tire? I mean, it's always, I mean, it's amazing.
I love those comments.
I think, but like someone said, where do you live? What kind of terrain do you drive on? What kind of vehicle do you have? Some people just give you an answer without knowing any of the factors.
Yeah. What's the best tire?
Especially when in this country, if you go east to west on the wooded trails of northeastern PA, or you're out in Moab, the two terrains are so far apart that the chances are of having one product that can do both those terrains is.
Yeah, and like I said, I sometimes have to fight the urge to answer those questions when I see them on Facebook. What's the best tire? Yeah. And my answer would be the best tire that works for you and your rig and your driving style.
Yeah.
There is no one simple answer. I mean, there's, Obviously, you don't
there's
want
good tires and bad tires.
Oh yeah, you don't want to put a set of mud style tractor tires on your crawler and expect it to drive up. You know what I mean? But it's not just the tires too. You can have the latest, greatest tire that's out there on the market for a crawler, and if you don't have the right foams in them, they're not going to perform the way they need to perform for you. It's such a multifaceted aspect of getting a truck to work right. I mean, there's so many contributing factors that go into it.
Oh, it's the classic rabbit hole, isn't it? Because it's the same as one-to-ones. You start getting into it. The moment you start changing things beyond standard, you could improve, or you could unimprove your vehicle, if that's a proper word. But you can make so many changes, and if you get involved in frame geometry and suspension and things like that, I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole for years, because I mean some of the experience and the knowledge required to make some determinations is just vast.
Oh yeah, I mean it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, in the fact that there's some basic underlying rules or laws of physics that come into play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this was dumb or smart on my part, but last Christmas I went down to I decided I was going to build a comp rig, and I had was cruising Facebook one night, and I saw this ad for a company called UGRC Labs. They're based out of Ohio. And I've always been a Red Cat fan. Now, Red Cat is kind of the AMC of the RC world. Okay. They have some good products, but they take some work to get them to really, really, really perform. So this UGRC Labs, Smitty's is the owner. Really nice guy, got to be a good friend of mine. Markets a chassis specifically for the Red Cat Gen 8. And basically the way he designed it is it's kind of a comp chassis that you take all your drivetrain and some of the components off the stock chassis, and you bolt it onto this. So it comes with a frame rail, skid, and some other attachments. It just totally transforms that truck. You got to drive what I call the Purple Predator.
Yes, yeah.
When we were up at Garrett's, and that's a UGRC Labs truck, and that truck works very, very well.
Yes, it does.
So he kind of took all the stuff you were just talking about as far as geometry and stuff like that, and mounting points and stuff, and kind of figured that out and made it a package.
Right.
To get that truck to perform the way I wanted it to perform was not nearly as easy as, say, my G-Speed. The G-Speed, or that kind of truck, is what I call a menu truck, okay? Where you can kind of go onto their website and you pick this, their G-Speed chassis, and they recommend, they have these skids, and you can call up Hardcore RC or In the Work links and say, hey, or go onto their website. They have a really great, both of those companies have really great user interfaces. We're saying, okay, I'm running this chassis, this skid, these axles, blah, 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 these, and hit enter, and they'll say, okay, these are the links you need. So you kind of bring all those components together, and you just kind of boat it together. And for the most part, it'll work really well right out of the box. Whereas the place that I took my UGRC Labs to, the chassis, was beyond that. You know what I mean? I can only surmise that it would work right out of the box. I mean, I know what the improvements it did to the truck that I had. I can only imagine what the UGRC Labs chassis will do for a stock Gen 8. I didn't have a stock Gen 8. I kind of started getting components to use from the Gen 8 into the UGRC Labs. But yeah, I wound up with a really great, what I'm going to call a trail killer. That's what I built the Predator for. There's a friend of mine in the club who kind of always set the gold standard with one of his trucks. He had a Power Wagon, and I was bound and determined this winter to build a truck that was going to beat the Power Wagon. That was kind of my thing. And I'd like to think that I came pretty close to it. But yeah, I mean, it's a great thing.
No. I mean, there's so much to learn. I mean, especially if you want to tinker and you want to sort of understand. I mean, to make changes, you need to understand what to do.
Yeah.
If you don't want to just.
If you want to shorten the learning curve, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's always helpful to have the understanding and the knowledge and the background as to what certain aspects of the components do and how they affect other things.
Right. But I mean, moving into the realm where you're going, I think, that knowledge becomes more and more invaluable, because, I mean, you are going to want to tailor that truck to your, I mean, I think what that your friend said about the driving style, I could see how that could influence how you might set your truck up. I mean, maybe you could take your truck and then have someone say, well, your driving style would suit this geometry a little bit better, or make some adjustments, do you think?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, has to do with your shocks, how you set your shocks up, what shock rate or shock oil you use, the weight of the shock oil, the springs, and so forth. Could kind of, I'm only surmising because I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around that whole driving style thing, because I really don't even know what kind of style I have. I just kind of, I think I learned from some really good drivers that I just kind of ran trails with, and that's kind of how I drive. It's just.
Well, you're finding your path. I mean, I think your style will out at some point. I mean, it'll just be an extension of you, of how you
exactly. And once again, it goes back to the whole RC thing. The whole, my truck is an extension of me. It's a culmination of everything that I know and everything that I have seen and done, and just kind of put it together to see if it works. It's a great test media.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it sounds like you're setting yourself up for a good run at it next year.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to be a little disappointed, but yeah.
Hey, any thoughts of Scale Nationals?
That's definitely one of my future. I know we're planning on going to Beat the Creek down in Kentucky in May. I've heard that's a really, really good event. My buddy and his son and my son and I are going. We're going to kind of do a little father-son trip together.
Nice.
Really excited about that.
Yeah.
Really excited about that.
Wow, you got some traveling plans.
Yeah. I plan on going back down to Super Shafty. I'm really looking forward to competing in Motorama this year. That's in February at the farm show.
Oh, wow, you're competing in that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, both myself and my son are going to compete in it, mainly because that's where we started. That was the spark that lit the flame, is watching those videos of previous events on YouTube. Yeah. I know I know a couple guys that helped put it on, and I know they put an immense amount of work into it. Brian Parker and Adam Hoopler and stuff like that. They work really hard to put on a good event.
Yes, they do.
I'll be going. A regular event for us is the Recon G6, which is held in July at Blue Rocks Family Campground in Leonardsville. That's an awesome time. If any of your listeners are looking for a family-oriented event, that's definitely a must-do.
Right. That's out in Slippery Rock, PA, right?
What's that?
Is that the one near Slippery Rock, PA?
No, that's actually towards Allentown. It's off of Route 78 in a place called Leonardsville.
Okay.
It's held at the Blue Rocks Family Campground. That's in July. That's a Recon G6 event. They do two events on that weekend. They do what's called the Fix Enduro, and then they do the Recon G6. Now, the Fix Enduro, I don't ever see me participating into that. That's a 3-hour, 6-hour, or 12-hour endurance event.
Right. Yeah.
Where you run your truck constantly for 3, 6, or 12 hours. A couple of my buddies have competed in the 12-hour, and that's just mind-boggling to me. That's like saying, "Hey, let's go run a marathon." No, that's a.
Yeah.
But that's a true test of driver and vehicle endurance.
Right.
They kind of, if you break down on the trail, you kind of got to fix it there. But the other aspect that I'm excited about is the G6. It's kind of like a competition where they give you a scorecard, and you go out, and they have, usually it's like 5 courses set up, and I forget the gate number. It's quite a few gates, and you kind of think of it as a scored trail run. So you go out, and if you roll over, you take a penalty point. If you whatever, and there's certain things along the trail where there's photo opportunities where you pull your truck up in front of something and take a picture of it.
Right.
So it's great.
Yeah, I would like to do a Re6 event. I haven't been some bucket.
Well, come on down. We're gonna have a cabin there, and come hang out with us for the weekend. Yeah, it's a blast.
That does sound fun. Now, do you build a different truck do you have a G6 style truck that you build?
I don't have a dedicated truck. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be taking my G-Speed down there.
No.
Because it's kind of like taking a Formula One car on a rally course type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm quite blessed with a number of rigs here that are well suited for the G1
like
or G6.
Truck, with a purple truck be our choice, the Recon?
I did run that there.
Yeah.
Actually, my original truck, my Red Cat Gen 7. Now, the only thing I have of the original truck are the frame rails. Everything else has been swapped out, changed, upgraded, so forth. That is still one of my favorite trucks to drive, and is quite capable for the G6. There's nothing on the G6 that is stupid difficult.
Right.
Like you would see on, say, a cop course or something like that. This past year, they had a night run. I'd be very remiss if I didn't say my newest appointment as a team driver is to Aiden Builds RC. It's a young kid, Aiden Hoopler. He's 12 years old, and he has his own 3D printing business, does some really, really neat stuff. And one of the things that he and his father did for the Recon G6 is they made LED trail markers, and they used them for the night run. They made hundreds of these little LED trail markers that were on sticks.
Oh, wow.
And I wish it was raining this past year, or I'd have got a video of it. But when you start there at the beginning of the trail of the night run, and you look up and all you see is these hundreds of little LED trail markers throughout the trail. You kind of take off, and they had little light up LED space creatures and octopuses and stuff like that throughout the trail. It was epic. It was epic. Yeah. And the camaraderie you get to see people from all over the area, the East Coast, West Coast, come in for that and stuff. Brian Parker puts on a wonderful event. He kind of organizes all of it.
Yeah, he does.
And I would definitely try to make it to the Recon G6 since you're here in PA. It's not that big of a drive for you.
Yeah, do you have anywhere where people can follow your progress?
I don't. I'm on Facebook. I'm not a big Instagram user. I should be more so. No, I mean, like I said, I'm pretty active on Facebook.
Yeah.
But anybody has any questions or whatever, I'm not gonna say I know the answer, but I probably know somebody that does.
Hey, that's always a good guy to talk to.
Yeah.
My book. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about networking. It's all about, having that quote unquote RC village.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if I missed anything, Ed, is there anything you like to add?
No, I think we're good.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, Ed, for joining us and telling us about your experiences. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from your lessons learned, your observations moving forward. I mean, it's a big move in a short pace of time, really, for what you're trying to do here. So.
Like I said, I get more out of it than I put into it. I think, it's something that my son and I and the wife can go out and do, and it gets us out of the house and gets us around some really great people that I know are going to wind up being lifelong friends.
Oh, that's great. Hey, well, I wish you all success, and I'm sure maybe we'll meet up at some events next year by the sound of things.
I hope so. So. We're not that far apart geographically, so we can see up at the Garrett compound or wherever.
Yeah, we'll have to stay in touch and see get our calendars to combine. So that'd be fun.
There you go.
Alrighty, sir. Hey, well, thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And you.
Hi. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode and, like me, got something really useful out of it. I feel I must take this opportunity to apologise both to you, the listeners, and also to Ed Wenger, because despite a good pre-show soundtrack, as you may have noticed, we had some serious issues with the microphone on our end. We did do our best to fix the soundtrack in post-production, and even patched in some sections to maintain the original recording as best we could. The offending microphone has been removed and currently resides in an undisclosed location. I hope you can hear from this recording my other microphone is working just fine. So not the best start to 2022, but fingers crossed the year ahead is looking better already. So again, my apologies, and I hope that it did not affect your listening enjoyment too much. As usual, thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts or comments, and I will do my best to reply to them all. You can find us at RC Truck Talk on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail. If you enjoyed this episode, then please recommend us to a friend, and if possible, leave a review. Credits: music by Croenda, audio by Lee Street Studio Production, and again, I thank you all for listening, and I hope you can make some time to get a little dirt or snow on those tires.